How you doing today? My name is Jeremy Heron, and this is my technique demonstration for our 664 class for treating trauma. Today I'm going to be talking about EDMR therapy, which stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. You might see me refer down to my notes from time to time, just as a reference, so I apologize for that, but I want to make sure that I hit all my key points. So in EDMR, I'm going to say it again, it's eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy. It focuses on replacing a preconceived negative thought process to trauma. So when an individual experiences a traumatic event, you know, your brain processes that and stores that differently than ordinary memory. So when a person does encounter a traumatic event that is not processed as normal memory, it kind of gets stuck. There's a few associations out there who I'll list in my written section of my technique demonstration that kind of refer to that as a memory that becomes frozen. It kind of gets locked in your nervous system. So when that happens, basically the person will relive the event as it's happening real time. So they still have an extreme sensitivity to smells, sounds, tastes, anything associated with that traumatic event months, years after the event. And that really translates into people with post-traumatic stress disorder, which will be the population of people that I'm going to be talking about. Our section is working with combat-related PTSD. So that being said, when these memories get locked in your nervous system, you experience a lot of the same sensitivities to the event every day. So the EDMR looks to focus to change that. It focuses on helping your brain process the information and store it differently. Basically, when we have a sensitive event within time, normally we put things behind us or we get over it. We can say, oh, yeah, I'm still sad about that, or I still remember that, but I don't feel as strongly about it as the day that it happened. So there's 8 phases that are included in helping an individual with EDMR therapy. I am going to refer down to a few of these just to look real fast to the phase, then I'll talk about it in my own words. So phase 1 is your assessment phase. So your assessment phase would cover just general information about the traumatic event, specific feelings, or just like you're pretty much your average assessment in any kind of therapeutic intervention. Where this becomes a little bit different is you are going to make a mental note of the sensitive areas that you later are going to want to target. So you're going to be targeting sensitive areas that you're later going to try to manipulate through the eye movement technique, which I'll get to. So it's your basic assessment stuff, but you're looking for these target areas, these sensitive areas that you want to address to manipulate predisposed feelings. The ultimate goal of phase 1 is just trying to get some information on where we want to go with the intervention and how we're going to help the person process this information differently. So our phase 2 is the primary goal of phase 2 is kind of congruent to what we do with any kind of therapeutic intervention as well, and that is establishing a rapport. And it's very important to establish a rapport with the individual because you want them to report and communicate information accurately. You want them to trust you so they can accurately describe to you what they're feeling. Because without them accurately telling you what they're feeling, you're not going to be able to manipulate the behavior because you won't know it. You won't accurately know what we need to manipulate. So that's what happens in phase 2. It's just building a rapport with the individual, building trust so they are accurately explaining what's going on and how they're feeling. So phase 3, we're back to another assessment phase. This is where we kind of gather some of the information from the first phase, and we start to look at what best represents the feelings with these target behaviors. In this phase, we're going to establish a statement associated with the behavior. first you would associate a negative self-belief. So if you are experiencing a situation where a traumatic event, you would ask the individual to explain what negative thoughts they have associated with that. So if we're dealing with somebody who was in a combat-related situation, dealing with death, or somebody in their company that have lost their life, they may say, "I could have changed that. I failed that person. I'm helpless. I was helpless." Feelings of helplessness, or that I could have done something more. They're the kind of statements that you would be looking for to associate with the event. So that then, okay. So then you would get the individual to, whether they believe it or not, make a positive statement about the situation. So if they're saying, "I was helpless, I could have done something," you would then revert to the situation and say, "I did everything I could. I am in control of the situation. It was not my fault. I'm okay with this." So you're basically trying to replace that negative thought process with a positive. And it gets a little bit more mechanical what we're going to do with these statements momentarily. So this is basically establishing all the bad things that the person can say about the situation. I'm worthless. I'm not lovable, in a variety of different scenarios, and replacing these statements with positives. I'm a lovable person. I'm a good person. If the target area is fear-based, I'm terrified in this situation. I'm genuinely afraid. You would replace that with, "I am safe." And then like I said, we're going to show you the mechanics of that, on how we're going to use that information to, kind of reprocess that. So again, it says that negative feelings get locked in the nervous system, and there's a couple different scales within EDMR therapy. You have a VOC scale, which is validity of cognition, and that's how it's on a scale from 1 to 7 on how completely you believe your negative statement. So if you say, "I'm a bad person," I would get on the VOC scale. I'd say, "Well, how would you feel on your VOC scale? How strongly about that?" Well, I would say, "Okay, I'm a 7 on that." So I have a top of the tier feeling that I'm a bad person. So that's for feelings. Your VOC scale covers feelings. And then there's another one about the beliefs. No, I'm sorry. The VOC scale was about the statements. The statements, like how strong do you believe the statement that you're a bad person. I apologize. The next scale is it's the units of disturbance scale. It's your SUD scale. And this talks about the feelings, how strong you feel about the feelings. So in a situation where you say, "I'm genuinely scared," you would have a 0 to 10, or you're anxious, depressed, stressed, things like that. It's a 0 to 10 scale. So we'll later talk about these scales, on where the person falls on these scales. So we'll move into phase 4, is the desensitization phase. This is where we're going to start actually getting numbers from the people on how they feel about these, how they feel about the feelings, how they feel about the emotions involved with their traumatic events, and we're going to record. You would record those, and then later refer to them after the actual mechanical intervention. So we might be dealing with somebody who's on I'm genuinely a bad person on my VOC scale at a 7, and I'm at a 9 or a 10 with I'm fearful, I'm hopeless on our SUD scale. So once that's established, we go to the installation phase, and this is where we start to translate the mechanical intervention. So here's where we're trying to get the individual to actually replace this negative belief with a positive. And the way that we do that is, and to give you an example, it says here, from my notes, it refers to someone remembering being abused, being physically beaten, and being helpless and being scared and not in control. What we're going to be trying to do is reprocess that information and is saying you are in control. It was not your fault. You're safe. It's okay to process information. So, how this is done is you would get the person to relive the event and replace a negative statement with a positive statement. And although this seems weird, and this is controversial, and every day, more and more every day, they're starting to get more and more validity in this intervention. It supposedly has helped over 1 million people now with PTSD. So you would take your fingers like this, and you would say to the person, I am in control. I am in control. I am in control. You are not helpless. You are not helpless. You are not helpless. And in some of the other demonstration videos I did see, a lot of times they'll use a metronome as well as a tick, 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 tick. And what I've gathered from the other demonstrations is it kind of activates your long-term memory and your short-term memory, and helps the information, helps your body process the information, because your body processes information in an encoded format. And when the event is traumatic, your body kind of stores information that's encoded that it can't read or interpret. So that's where you get the frozen or stuck in your nervous system situation. And it's explained actually through a little bit of research that I've done on it. It's actually you're trying to transition. I'm sorry. You're trying to transition information from like a body style memory, a memory where your body remembers and still produces feelings and emotions related to the event, to a narrative, to where the narrative thought process, you can start, talking about it and processing it and making sense of it and decoding and decrypting the information. And it's an actual process. It takes you from having a body reaction or an emotional or physical response, symptoms to stress, to a narrative. And this is the kind of thing where you can think back on a memory and put it behind you. It can still affect you, but you can start to put it behind you. We're really looking to reduce the body tension of the traumatic event. So that leads us to our 6th phase, which is our body scan phase. This is after this intervention of our finger intervention. This is where we go back and reevaluate our VOC and our SUD scale to see where they normally fall on that. We had a 7 that I'm a bad person, and we had a 9 and 10 that I'm genuinely fearful and helpless. And historically, these numbers have significantly dropped in people who are within 1 to 3 sessions with people who are suffering from PTSD. So that goes into the 7th phase, and that's closure. And our closure phase is just basically, debriefing with the individual on what we did and accompanied with like relaxation techniques and things like that to kind of maintain the 8-phase process. And in our 8th phase, it's our reevaluation phase. We'll meet with the client again to see where we kind of stand with long-term maintenance, long-term success of the intervention, and if there's any new information or new stressors that we need to address. We'll have the person relive the event again, bring it up, and if they do not produce any body tension, then it was successful. If they are still experiencing physical symptoms to the traumatic event, you just run the 8. We wouldn't have to run the 8 phase. You would run the reprocessing, where you would run from about installation 5 installation stage to the end. So basically, you would establish if there's any new stressors, new events, and reprocess those ones as well. This would be helpful for people who have phobias, witness traumatic events, and for some reason, and now it's becoming a staple in combat-related PTSD. Like I said, it's controversial, but every day there's more evidence that it's effective and it's been helping a lot of people. So To recap briefly, you take somebody with negative associated events, negative feelings, negative emotions, and you replace that with positive as you're moving, as you're helping them eye movement. For some reason, it activates both of the memory systems and helps transition the memory from a body style memory that produces physical symptoms to a narrative where you can actually process the information and make sense of it and put it behind you without a heightened, emotionally charged realization of the event every day. It's like getting over anything. So that's where we're at. Thank you very much for viewing my presentation. If you have any questions, concerns, would like to talk about it more, it's pretty interesting stuff. Look forward to viewing all of your presentations. So have a good evening. Thank you.